some very concrete information in there that we're going to dive into with our next panelists who will be joining us on the stage. First up, I'd like to welcome Tramayne Monaghan, who is the Chief Innovation Officer with Tencent Africa. Tramayne? Next up, David Hedlund with St. John's University. He's an associate professor from the USA. Come on up, David. And finally, we have our president of the International Esports Federation, Mr. Colin Webster. Come on up, Colin. Well, that was a lot of information there, a lot of research, and certainly a lot of aspects that our audience can relate to. So I really look forward to diving in with a variety of experts, some in the health business, some in the mega sponsorship and publisher business, and of course our governance expert and our leader, the president here of the, yes, that would be you, Colin. Maybe we'll start with you, Colin. First of all, thank you again, Janine. That was some really amazing information. So let's start with you. How important is it to, when you look at the amount of information out there, the amount of impact that's happening in the sport to the players, what role does governance have to play? What role does leadership from the federations and from the international organization have to play with making sure that there is a safe, accessible environment for these players?
Well, that indeed is a very diverse question. Because basically, if you start, you'd be looking at your national government, which sets the overall legislation and actually sets the rules by which all the national federations and the national sports associations work. And they themselves have their own national priorities, depending on the country, and have, of course, the interests, or they at least should have the interests of the population at large. So that would be enforced onto the national federation. So if you had to look at a traditional sport like athletics, you would see that they have to comply with the legislation of the country in which the body is situated, and of course by the National Olympic Committee. And of course, their own regulations in order to ensure that each athlete has the proper medical care.
Mm-hmm. And the health and safety is very important, right? Obviously.
That's right.
So now, David, you've done a lot of research as well as Janine into the overall health and welfare of the athlete. What trends are you seeing? I guess I'm sure some are similar to what Janine mentioned, but what differentiates maybe some of those findings that you've had?
Sure. First and foremost, if you're looking for good information, I think there's more good information. Janine did a fantastic job. I was joking with her that she basically just gave you a syllabus for a medical course in esports. So if you're looking for those educational opportunities, she's laid a lot of that out there for you. There is now, it was published in April by some colleagues of mine, the esports health model. It's open access. So it was published in the British Medical Journal. So it's got some really good information that kind of highlights many of the key points that Janine has made. In terms of some of the research that we've done and some of the trends that we're seeing, certainly as we look forward, I'll do this backwards, certainly the AR, VR, and MR, I think this is going to be a really interesting opportunity because it brings together some of the exergaming positives, the opportunity to kind of get into motion and to experience. Now, certainly there's many different kinds of platforms, both literal and metaphorical, that people can play some of these games. But I think this brings some really interesting opportunities. But in terms of the research, I mean, we're just starting to really get a good sense as to what kinds of issues many of these athletes are facing. What they're doing to counterbalance them. If they're sedentary for several hours, what are they doing are they stretching? Are they doing yoga? One of the most interesting things that we've found is as we look at really casual players going up to professional players, many of the professional players, probably due to their background, their experience, their knowledge, the fact that they have a lot of resources that help them. They've got nutritional experts, they've got weightlifting and conditioning coaches. They are on par, from what our research has discovered, with many professional athletes. That they are doing weightlifting training, that they have professional nutritional guidance. And so some of this, I think, may just take some time to filter from that upper level down to the semi-professional levels, the collegiate levels, the high school, the more casual levels.
Exactly.
So some of it is just, we just need more time to disseminate some of the information we're talking about here at this panel.
So Janine, some of the research that you went through, I mean, a lot of this, when we were looking at it, was a lot with the casual, the more casual amateur players versus at the competitive level. And to your point, I mean, the average traditional athlete at the high level has maybe 12 to 13 different types of people around them in their, I guess to use this word again, in their entourage, right? From their chiro, their masseuse, their sleep therapists, et cetera, et cetera. How did you differentiate in your study between that competitive athlete versus that more casual?
So, like David's saying, the literature doesn't really differentiate the two. It's only now recently that researchers are realizing that there is a esports scene. We have competitive gamers, and now we need to establish research that focuses on their needs and their health. You see, the problem is that, or the thing that I think we need to remember is that you're not just born a competitive esports player. You start out as a casual player, you then become semi-professional, and then you become a professional esports player.
And those needs change as you work your way up the ranks. Yeah.
But unfortunately, it's a little bit different in versus traditional sports, because you can have very poor health issue, like how you can have poor diet, poor everything, and still become a pro, gamer. You can't do that in traditional sports. You have to have started out with a baseline level of good health, and
sport.
being physically good at the sport that you're doing.
Sure.
So the problem is that we need to target this casual level, because eventually they're going to become pro sports players, and now all of a sudden we can't be changing big health issues at that level. It's
So it starts from the
It should start from-
grassroots and building that
exactly,
culture of
exactly.
health and wellness and
Yeah.
well-being.
Can I
yes,
chip in quickly?
absolutely.
I mean, for me, I think it's two things. The time required is definitely one of them. We're seeing now for the first time esports stars at the upper echelon with these sorts of advantages, the coaches, the nutritionists, the chiros. But when we talk about those stars, or when the gaming community talks about those stars, no one talks about that.
Yeah.
So they themselves are not propagating that message downwards. We still have this massive culture of respect the hustle. How many hours are you putting in? The gaming house closes at 5 o'clock and 2 guys stay behind. They've gamed all day, but they respect the hustle. They want to push harder. They want to go another 2 hours. That's the messaging the casual gamers are still receiving. So to get to that pro level, they still think it's only about hours, not, and I agree, there is a certain level of hours, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, to facilitate those hours, there's a lot of other things we should be touching. And so while I respect the ground up, it should also be from top down. And I think we need to do both.
Colin?
Yes, and that's of course where the National Federation comes in. The national federations have to reach out to the school level. They have to go to the very lowest level in their grassroots system to actually get that message across. You can't actually wait for a trickle down. You have to actually encourage and enable that information to be disseminated.
So no shortcuts. There's
None.
no shortcuts to the path to success. And maybe you were one of the last guys. He used to play football. We're talking about your football life and
So
all those hours there too, right?
one of the biggest challenges I think esports still faces, how many people in this room have seen the Simpsons episode or the South Park episode that are focused on esports and gaming? I mean, the images that have been portrayed out there are not necessarily representative of what's actually going on. They're very
Reality.
stereotypical, very generalized kind of views. But when you think about esports and traditional sports, can you play traditional sports for 12 hours a day? I think it's virtually impossible. And so when people think about, okay, so what's unique about what we're doing with esports? You know, what kind of unique messaging? Well, there is this capability of, you know, if that 10,000 hour rule is true, that you need 10,000 hours to become an expert in something, if Malcolm Gladwell is right, then you can expedite that in esports compared to anything else. And there may be more and more individuals who see these esport role models, which we heard about earlier today, and thinking, okay, well, I can just speed this up by going 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, something like this. And so we need to be very careful about some of this imaging and messaging and trying to contradict is not quite the right word, it's what's coming to my head. When we hear and see some of these stereotypes, that actually at the highest levels, some of the esports athletes are the healthiest sorts of people that we could possibly imagine.
Absolutely. Some of it's about balance too, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think what we don't see is that that clear messaging. The 10,000 hours, should it be correct, is we have kids, 15, 16-year-olds, already thinking that they have to retire at 25. You know, the reflexes are coming down. They know the health issues might be there. And so they're already thinking, how do I get pro as fast as possible in a non-sustainable way in many instances? And I think that's the challenge we have to break down.
But you know, when you talk about traditional sports again, I mean, you have people who will do doping, right? You have, you know, particularly, I remember being around a lot of athletes with problems with anorexia. And so there are a lot of other types of issues too in traditional sports, obviously, that now it's happening more and more in esports on a different level, right? So what do we say to people? Like, what do we say to these young people? Like, who is like responsible for that? Is it the education? Is it through the NFs? Is it through sponsors? Like, where is that shared responsibility start?
So I think what Leopold was talking about this morning is really important. Like role models in every sphere, it's like pivotal. You see, like when I watch you know, Championship League of Legends, or when I was watching the Fortnite World Championships, nobody, you know, focuses on like what goes on behind the scenes. You know, what it really takes to make it in pro, because it's not just the hustle or the grind. There is so many other, you know, factors that go into it. And I think parents, schools, and these people in these positions, because they now have this platform, and I feel like it's not really being used like effectively for health promotion. You know, it's more just like self-promotion rather than health promotion. So I think these are all like, you know, key people in sort of like, I don't want to say like managing, you know, sort of the health outcomes of, you know, grassroots level like players. But I definitely think we need to be looking at promoting health, because if we can promote health in like everyday life, in sports, and, you know, just general well-being, I feel like, you know, esports should be no different. And if people do have the serious consideration of like, you know, making it big or going pro, you know, they do need to understand that healthy body equals healthy mind.
That's right. So how do we tap into government initiatives around health? A lot of countries do have health promotions, and this is very, very, I know in our country, it's linked in many ways, and now there's a big movement around safe sport, the safe sporting environment, which is a whole other thing that I know we'll touch on in a minute. So where is that role for the national federations and the international federation as well to help to be a catalyst to open these discussions?
Definitely. So when you're looking at the National Federation, you can't deal with your Department of Sport without looking at dealing with, well, quite frankly, other ministries. So you should be looking at, obviously, the Technology Ministry, which is important, but of course the Health Ministry. And every health ministry actually has a very active outreach program, because no government wants its population to be ill. They want them to be productive. taxpayers.
Yeah, for
You know,
sure.
so that's where you need your national federations. It's another avenue to explore for national federations, and it's another avenue that can actually provide quite sizable amounts of funding. When it comes to the international body, we already are a signatory of WADA, and that is something that we take very seriously. We deal with Adams, and we have to comply with all of their rules and regulations. But that is something that, of course, we have to assist the national federations on as well. So the international body's function is to assist the national federation in terms of its own recognition in order to meet and liaise with their own ministries, but also to comply with international health requirements.
But you know what's so interesting? So I wear multiple hats. I watch over some of our esports teams at my university, and anyone who's familiar with the United States collegiate sports system is aware, it's huge. Let me just summarize it that way. Scholarships and, million-dollar contracts and, billion-dollar endowments and all sorts of things. And the traditional sports, they have so many of these resources, but yet we're not really applying any of these existing resources yet to esports.
Wow.
So, at least I could say at the collegiate level, I think there's actually a great opportunity to use what we already have, what we've already learned through traditional sports, and apply some of these things to esports. Unfortunately, maybe this gets back to, is esports a sport? We get back to this foundational question, which is, they don't want to play with us in the sandbox right now. But there are a lot of these resources that exist out there where I think, having been a national team coach earlier in my life, the ability to reach out to other federations within my nation and ask them, okay, who are your sports psychologists? Who are your nutrition people? That there should be some resources that are accessible, especially to federations, that you could leverage in order to try to help your athletes, because I think that's what most of us in this room, that's one of our primary concerns, is making sure our athletes are well cared for.
Absolutely. Tramayne, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think what we must understand is it's going to take a while, because for so long, gamers, we've been the misfits, the outcasts, the outsiders, nothing mainstream about that. So you become a pro gamer, and you're making a $6-figure US dollar salary now, or you're getting sponsorships, you're getting all sorts of goods sent to your house, left, right, and center. You still don't feel mainstream. You still don't feel like you should be fitting in with the federations or fitting in with the scholarly structures. And I guess I wonder if the question's not, how do we get the gamers involved into that dialogue and start there and then bring it through the structures like that? I think the thing we're missing sometimes is how deep this rabbit hole goes in terms of how gamers have been perceived in the past and how we're wanting to perceive them now.
So who's that up to?
All of us.
All of us, yeah, exactly.
I
That's why
honestly
we're
think
having
it's
this
a
conference.
federation thing, it's a gaming thing, it's a publishing
So it's all the
responsibility.
stakeholders working together.
You
on
said
that.
earlier, it's a shared responsibility across everyone.
I also think that, the sort of like the mindset around like gaming and gamers, it's very slowly changing. Unfortunately, that change is coming a little bit too slowly. Like, esports has been around for a long time, and I've been playing for my whole life, and yet, my parents would tell me every single day, Janine, why are you playing these games? You should be studying
My
for your
parents
medical.
said, why am I running? I should be in med school. Same thing.
Yeah. So, I mean,
I'm sure your parents did the same.
So, but and you see, I think they still have that sort of mindset
That's
that you
right, yeah,
cannot
for sure.
achieve anything from being a gamer. Like that mindset is still very prevalent. What are you actually achieving from being a gamer? I think that's an important question to answer, because I feel like a lot of pro gamers, they aren't really, discussing like sort of the benefits that, gaming has had in their life.
Yeah, for
you
sure.
know.
We talked earlier on the earlier panel about storytelling. I mean, there's so many great stories, right? And so much inspiration and the hard work ethic that comes from gaming. Just, I'm sure you put that into being a doctor, right? And into your business,
I
etc.
think that's critical. It's like how do we get a few ex-gamers into interesting job opportunities and showcase that? So why would I hire a gamer? It's actually not about storytelling or work ethic.
lessons
It's about
from sport,
it's game
they're
theory.
universal, universal lessons.
We're moving to a place where we have to worry about artificial intelligence doing mundane jobs for us. Why would I not hire a gamer who understands game theory, who understands how to manipulate characters through the world?
Right.
So how do we get gamers post their careers as well to be showcased like that, to make it a real career, Mom?
That's right, exactly. And a lot of governments and other organizations are promoting STEM. Like, that's a huge part of it as well. Did you want to say something? Sorry.
Yes. Well, I think it actually comes down to the maturity of the actual national federation. So, for example, most of the federations here are quite young, besides Casper and Mind Sports South Africa. Mind Sports South Africa has been going since 1985. And in 1991, it actually became a member of the National Olympic Committee, which allows us to give this Protea Award. Now, I know our teams are not as good as all the rest of yours. However, this award, the Protea Award, is actually awarded by the minister.
That's right, yeah.
So it actually has a lot of weight in itself. This is the difference between getting a job and not getting a job. So you're looking at the fact that practically everybody who gets Protea colours goes to university on a bursary. So you're talking about free education in a country where actually education is quite expensive. So we've made a huge difference in a number of people's lives who otherwise would never have gone to university. And I think that's the importance. That's the role for the National Federation. It's to actually reach that level of accreditation where people will turn around and say, yes, it's actually giving me something far beyond just gaming. It's giving me life skill. It's giving me actually an opportunity in life to do well.
But how are we letting gamers know that? I think that's the critical thing. Because we need them to buy into it.
It's telling the story.
And the only way we need to tell that story, I think, yeah.
Well, that is why we actually have a very active policy at school levels. So we have over 68 schools affiliated directly to MSSA. And each school has between 300 to 800 gamers.
So it talks to that grassroots level.
Yeah.
So I think there's 2 points I want to just add on to the kind of panel discussion. Number one, we are now starting to see professional athletes saying, I use a sports simulation game in order to do X, Y, or Z.
That's right, yeah.
NBA players are using NBA 2K to scout opponents they don't know, to figure out what kind of moves they have or tendencies in the game. So one thing I think that will help is there's already a connection between professional athletes and gamers. We see these at South by Southwest, the
They're
way they
buying
combine together
teams,
for the
of course,
pro-ams,
yeah, yeah.
There's a lot of these opportunities that I think really open things
right,
up.
yep.
The second thing, and I'm sorry I didn't raise my hand earlier, I didn't want to take time away from others. I think there's actually a really interesting opportunity. I know Alan Fang from AirAsia spoke here last year. If you haven't met Alan, you really need to. Alan is he works for AirAsia, he's their esports manager. He loves esports more than anything. And what he's done at AirAsia, they have teams within AirAsia. They have competitions on Friday afternoons. We talk about, let's get people jobs, let's create curriculum. Okay, that's great. But how about we just start with our existing companies? Why can't my university have a faculty gaming group that plays on Friday afternoons? Why can't a car company or an airline? Why can't you have gaming clubs within these organizations? Why can't traditional employers to bring these opportunities out so that maybe people are getting jobs at companies, but then they still have that opportunity to semi-competitively compete? I think there are lots of opportunities out there for bringing some of these resources together and to sports offerings.
That's good. Those are good.
That's a great point, because I think last week there was a study out of the US saying that millennials would rather choose a place to work where they feel flexible and do the things they love instead of a 20% raise.
That's true. Yeah, exactly.
So we're moving to a place where something like that is completely viable because I will choose that place of work, and now it becomes an interesting way for me to recruit really good talent and to have highly engaged employees who are gamers.
And that creates a healthy options and a healthy culture. And maybe just one last thing I want to touch on, because we have to move to Q&A here, so get your questions ready. We're going to have a few minutes of that before the next break. I just want to touch on the mental health aspect. And I know it's something you've done a lot of research on, and but let's start with the Federation first. So where is that as a priority in terms of looking at the mental health at this point?
Well, of course, mental health is pivotal in esports. I mean, if you're not mentally well, you're not going to be participating on any sort of level. So you've got to actually always look at the mental health aspects. It's a non-negotiable.
Absolutely. So do we have a hand up? I thought I saw one in the... Okay, there we go. Okay, got one back there. Please state where you're from. We all know where you're from, but just state it anyway. He's over there. It's coming. Our friend in the back. Oh, another one. Okay.
Okay, thanks. My name is Thomas. I'm the president of the Danish Esports Federation. So this is a lot of talk. We need some action. Actually, in Denmark, we have already made an ethical codex together with the existing sport around esports. So we are now telling the clubs that, for example, Monster or the Red Bull and so forth, they're not allowed to actually use that when they train until they're after 18 years of age. That's one thing. We also tell them that you need to sleep a certain amount of hours. We also talk to them about betting and ludomania, that you can actually buy loot boxing and everything else, be pulled into many different things that you shouldn't be pulled into. So I think from the IFS side, we should do an ethical codex that covers everything, because then we have the chance to actually speak out and say what is needed to be said on this.
Good comments. Thank you very much. Our friend in the last row there. Another question?
Hi, Stephen from Belgium Federation. You guys talked a lot about top-down, bottom-up, and a lot is centered around the gamer himself. I just want to get your comments on an aspect that I think is equally important almost in solving the solution, at least for the next 10, 20 years, as we get there and as we incorporate that healthy structure, is talking to the parents. Because quite often, especially now, parents see gaming as an easy solution for their kids to just, oh, you know what, go play your video games and shut up. You know, that is the mindset that a lot of parents have. And they don't educate themselves on what their kid is actually doing. Is it age appropriate? Should he be playing 4, 5, 6 hours straight? Is he still exercising? Is he still doing enough to have a healthy lifestyle? Again, I think that is an important question, an important element of it. And so I want to get your feedback on how we can potentially
Anybody want to start
do
with
that
that
as well.
Okay, I'll start. Thanks for that question. So I think, unfortunately, you know, we can't dictate to people how they want to parent their children, and we can't tell people to be like quote unquote better parents or whatever. But I do think that it is important for like national federations as well as the players to make an effort to include parents, because I feel like gamers, like, you know, have sort of a very like excluding type of, you know, like reaction towards their parents. So for example, I'll use a personal example in my own life. So for many years I played League of Legends and my parents just didn't understand it. My mom especially, my dad was a little more lenient on it because I used to game with my father when, like, you know, I was growing up. We would play like Mario together and stuff. So it was like a bonding thing between my dad and I. And eventually, like, I came to the realization that my parents just didn't understand what it meant to me. So I sat them down and while I was playing a game, and I said to them, this is what I do, this is what this game is, I want you to see what it's like so that you can better understand what it means to me and what it means in my life. I think that is, so it is also, it's the role of the parents, it's the role of the gamer, and it's the role of the federations for there to be a sort of inclusive environment for everyone. You know, it shouldn't, the responsibility shouldn't just fall on a single party, I don't think.
That's right, because we're all in it together. Do you want to add to that?
No, Stephen actually raises a very vital point. And that is one of the reasons why schools are so important, because parents put a lot of trust in schools, and they tend to do what the schools advise them. And that brings us back to mental health, because one of the problems that you have is a lot of parents allow their children to play games which are not age appropriate. You know, and I've had many an argument with many a parent where they say, but I know my son and he's mature enough. And the answer is no, he's not, and you're a bad parent. Sorry, but that's the truth. It is a problem. It's a case that you have to educate the parent as well. You cannot accept, basically as a national federation, you cannot accept an entry from a child. You've got to actually work through the parent to ensure that the parent knows what is going on, that the parent is aware of the age restrictions, should there be any, and that the parent is involved in the child's life, at least at some level. It cannot be a day camp.
Yeah. And some accountability, it goes both ways as well, right? That the parents need to feel confident in the system as well. So making the system strong is also very important, because as a parent, you want your kid to be in a safe environment with people they can trust, and knowing that there could be a pathway if that's a choice for them. As a matter of fact, our next session will have a former player on here who is actually doing some direct work with parents. So it's going to be cool to hear you speak a little after. Do you want to have a little precursor now, or you want to wait?
I could wait for our panel before I'm doing it now. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll say it during the panel then.
Okay, wait for his panel. You're not going to, you won't want to miss that, okay? He's got some pretty cool things to say about
That's called marketing.
parents. Yeah, that's right, exactly.
If we're looking for some more ideas, though, about what can we do if we take Tomas's question and provide it some answer, I mean, from a federation's perspective, the job of an academic, someone like me with a PhD or an MD, we do research. And so, you know, Janine has already highlighted that I even brought my laptop up here in case anyone tried to quiz me on some of the data and statistics. You know, but for example, I mean, I hope that at one of the upcoming conferences we're going to present some of our data. But top 5 areas where players are feeling pain or discomfort, age 18 to 25. Eyes, neck, head, hand, back, 1 to 5. Wow. Top 5 things that they're doing to limit discomfort, pain, or injury. Limit playing time, stretching, I can't even read my writing. Oh, getting sufficient sleep, exercise, and actually warming up. So one of the things that we can obviously do is try to get some of this data into the hands of parents. But that data needs to come from somewhere. And so there are certainly opportunities for academic or research marketing groups and federation partnerships. You know, there's a lot of people who have a growing interest in this area, who are willing to do a lot of the legwork. And so doing this research, trying to get that information out there to parents and say, hey, if your son or daughter is gaming a lot and you see them always flexing their hands or fingers, hey, maybe they've extended too much.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great way to end off, and also another great way was hearing some action, right? We all need action, so I hope that from this very fruitful panel, I wish we had more time. I hope you all got some good advice to take some actions back to your federations and to your organizations. So with that, I'd like to thank again this amazing panel for their contributions today. So thank you all so much. Round of applause for our panels, ladies and gentlemen. And with that, we will take a very short coffee break. Let's be back here in 15 minutes. During that time, please check out the archery VR, and I believe there's another workshop across there in the Venice room. So we'll see you back in 15, 20 minutes. Thank you.